A black soldier just returned from deployment ready to finally go home, but when he steps into the airport, everything changes. A racist cop targets him without cause, humiliates him in front of others, and then just 7 minutes later he's fired on the spot. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me, this is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today, and if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. It was just an ordinary Monday morning, 7:46 a.m. Atlanta, Hartsfield, Jackson. The kind of day when everyone's just trying to get somewhere. Not too fast, not too slow, just get home. That's all he wanted to. Malik Johnson, 33 years old, Staff Sergeant, United States Army. 9 months in Mosul, 2 tours in Afghanistan before that. Decorated, disciplined, done. He was finally going home. Wore his boots like armor, even though inside he felt soft. Tired. Grateful. There's something different about walking through an airport after war. Every sound is louder, every person looks busier, and yet, you see things more slowly. Like the little girl in the pink coat struggling with her suitcase. Like the old veteran in a navy cap nodding as you pass. You catch that nod. You give it back. It's not a hello. It's a recognition. I see you. I know what it costs. Malik didn't need recognition. Not anymore. He'd had his share. He just wanted his mama's cooking and a good long nap. He carried one duffel bag, military issue. Worn canvas, stitched edges, and inside, folded neat. A letter from his niece, a picture of his dad. Also a vet. And a medal he never told anyone he received. But what he didn't carry. Rage. Suspicion, bitterness, those had been left behind in Iraq, buried in sand and sweat. He thought so anyway. Then it happened. Sir, I need you to step aside. The voice was calm but sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Malik turned. TSA officer, white, younger, maybe 30, clean shave, tight jaw, and a stare that tried to undress a man's soul. Problem? Malik asked. Voice steady, posture upright, not confrontational, just military. Random screening, the officer replied. A second glance at Malik's bag. A third at his uniform jacket. Then the emphasis. Random, but everyone could see. The woman next in line, a white woman with a yoga mat and latte, was waved through with a smile. The elderly couple behind Malik shifted uncomfortably. And the black janitor sweeping the floor? He froze. Not because he was surprised, but because he'd seen it before. Too many times. Malik exhaled. He'd been warned this might happen. Don't wear the uniform in public. It'll get you profiled. That's what James had told him. Another black vet. Retired after 20 years. America loves the idea of you, not the skin you're in. But Malik wanted to believe better. Wanted to believe the patch on his chest mattered more than the pigment of his skin. So he kept calm. He stepped aside. They opened his bag. Flipped through his uniforms. Checked his socks. Unfolded his flag. The same one that had draped over a friend's coffin last year. And asked why he was traveling alone. Alone? After 9 months in the desert, he didn't need a chaperone. He needed rest. But the questions kept coming. Did you pack this yourself? Any contact with foreign nationals recently? What's the purpose of your travel? Malik could have laughed. Purpose? Brother, I bled for this country. I killed for it. I watched good men die for it. I don't need a purpose. This airport is mine too. But he didn't say any of that. He just answered politely, firmly. Because that's what black men are taught to do when facing authority. Lower your volume. Sharpen your grammar. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden moves. In war, you learn how to read eyes. And this officer's eyes weren't reading Malik as a soldier. They were reading him as a threat. That's when a second man showed up. Bigger. TSA supervisor. Same shade of suspicion. Whispered something to the first guy. Then looked Malik up and down. Sir, we have a situation, he said. What situation? Malik asked. You fit a description. That line. You fit a description. The most dangerous sentence a black man can hear in America. It's code for We've decided who you are before you've opened your mouth. People started watching. Phones came out. And suddenly Malik wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a spectacle. You got ID? One of them asked. Malik handed over his army ID. The supervisor looked at it, frowned, then handed it back like it burned his hand. Military doesn't give you a free pass, he muttered. Malik stood still, didn't blink, didn't breathe hard. He knew the game. The moment you flinch, raise your voice, demand dignity, you become dangerous. He glanced to the side and saw a boy watching him, maybe 10, clutching his dad's hand, eyes wide, mouth open. Malik wondered, what is this kid learning right now? That heroes look like criminals? That skin erases service? The first officer started to unzip Malik's other bag. Inside was a small wooden box, polished, sacred, held the dog tags of his best friend, killed by an IED in Tikrit. Don't touch that, Malik said, more firmly now, just a fraction louder. And that was enough. Step back, barked the supervisor. We have the right to search anything. Malik raised his hands, not in surrender, in restraint, in prayer. Passengers started filming. A white woman, maybe in her 50s. She looked stunned. She asked, why are you treating him like this? He hasn't done anything. Silence. TSA ignored her. Then they said the words that detonated everything. We're calling airport security. For what? For standing still? For carrying a folded flag and a war medal? Within minutes, 2 airport police arrived. One touched his baton. The other asked, is he resisting? Resisting? Resisting what? Gravity? Trauma? Humiliation? 7 minutes. That's how long it took. From random screening to full-blown escalation. From soldier to suspect. From homecoming to hostility. But here's the part they didn't expect. The video. It went live. Right there, as Malik stood with hands still raised, an elderly woman posted, this man just served our country. He deserves thanks, not this. Hashtag Black Veterans Matter. The clip caught the moment the officer touched the dog tags. Caught Malik saying, please, that's all I have left of him. And something shifted. Not in the TSA, not yet. But in the air. You could feel it. That raw, uneasy murmur of people watching something they couldn't unsee. The man who wore the uniform. The man who obeyed every order. The man who left pieces of himself in other countries. Was being interrogated like a criminal in the very country he served. That's the opening to this story. That's the part that should make your fists clench and your eyes sting, especially if you've worn a uniform too. Because you know what it means. You know how it feels to come home and not recognize what home does to men like you anymore. This story doesn't end here. It gets louder, messier, more shocking. But it starts in those 7 minutes. 7 minutes that reveal what some people see when they look at a black soldier. Not honor, not sacrifice, but suspicion. And that should haunt all of us. If it doesn't, then maybe we haven't been listening hard enough. Maybe we've grown too comfortable watching injustice happen, as long as it's quiet, polite, and carried out in the name of procedure. But this time, the world was watching. The question is, will it remember? Will you? This is just the beginning. In the quiet moments between being dragged away and the phone finally ringing, Malik Johnson found himself sitting alone on a hard airport bench, pressed against a cold white wall inside an interview room that smelled like bleach and suspicion. No cuffs, no charges, just containment, just waiting. That's what they always called it, just waiting. He sat with his boots still laced tight, his hands resting on his thighs, the same way he used to wait for orders in a combat zone. But this wasn't Mosul. This wasn't Ramadi. This was Atlanta. And somehow it felt more hostile. A black and white clock ticked above his head, indifferent to what time it was for him. His phone buzzed once. A message from his mother. Just made the cornbread. You almost home? He didn't reply. Couldn't. His throat burned. And not from anger, but from the weight of holding in everything he couldn't say out loud without being labeled aggressive. He thought of his niece Ava, the one who wrote him letters every week. She was 9 and had once said, Uncle Malik, I tell my friends you fly jets and punch bad guys. He didn't have the heart to correct her. But if she could see him now, slumped in the sterile room like a man caught stealing gum, what would she think? What would she learn? They finally let him go. No apology. No explanation. Just a dismissive, "You're clear to board." He looked at the officer and asked one simple question. "Was this about my skin or my uniform?" The man blinked, didn't answer, and turned away. Malik didn't need an answer. He already knew. Outside, the boarding gate was nearly empty. The plane had left. No one waited. No one asked him anything. It was like he'd never existed at all. He booked another flight. 6 hours later. A layover in Charlotte. At that point, he wasn't even mad. Just exhausted. As he sat near gate C-22, a boy came up to him. Maybe 7 or 8. Biracial. Curly hair. Big eyes. Wearing a tiny red hoodie and carrying a Spider-Man backpack. "Mister, are you a real soldier?" the boy asked. Malik looked at him. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to smile. But the truth caught in his mouth. So he just nodded. The boy grinned and saluted like he'd seen in cartoons. His mother came running up a moment later, apologizing, pulling the boy away. She gave Malik a quick, embarrassed smile, then turned, like so many others, and vanished. He pulled out his phone and opened the video. Over 500,000 views now. His face frozen in that moment. Hands up, lips parted, confusion painted across his expression like war paint. The comments poured in. Disgraceful. How do we treat our heroes like this? Typical TSA garbage. But also, you never know what he was really doing. Could have been dangerous. Don't be soft. And one that stayed with him. Being a vet doesn't mean you're not black. That one hit like a bullet. It was cruel, but it was true. He'd always known it. Growing up in Macon, Georgia, Malik had been taught early that his skin color would enter rooms before he did. That his smile would have to work twice as hard to calm fears he didn't create. That respect, for a black boy, was never given, only earned and then constantly re-earned. The military had offered something different. It didn't promise color blindness, but it did offer structure. Ranks, protocols, standards. You worked, you rose. You bled, you earned. And for a while that made sense. Until today. As he waited for the new flight, he thought of his father. Elijah Johnson, Vietnam vet, Bronze Star. Never talked much about the war, but when Malik joined the army, the old man handed him a folded letter. It read, "Son, the fight doesn't end when you leave the battlefield. Sometimes, it begins right when you come home." Malik hadn't understood that then. He thought his father meant PTSD, civilian life, reintegration. But now he saw it clearer than ever. Coming home meant confronting the lie that your sacrifice would buy you dignity. That draping yourself in stars and stripes would protect you from suspicion. Didn't. Not when your skin looked like his. A memory came flooding back. He was 16, riding his bike at dusk, stopped by cops 2 blocks from home, asked what he had in his backpack, told to sit on the curb. That was the first time he realized a uniform wasn't protection. It was conditional armor, good only as long as the white gaze saw it as deserved. At the terminal, the gate agent smiled at him. Not because she recognized him, but because it was her job. "Hello, sir. Boarding in 20 minutes. He nodded. "Thanks." She looked at his duffel. "You military?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you for your service." He almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd how those 6 words had become automatic, hollow, even performative. Like a script everyone had to say. "Thank you for your service." Even if we don't respect your humanity. Even if we stand by while you're humiliated in public. "Thank you for your service." As if that covered the stain. But he didn't call her out. Didn't make a scene. He just took his boarding pass and sat down. That's what they don't tell you about racism. It doesn't always wear a hood or scream slurs. Sometimes, it whispers protocol, smiles politely, leaves you doubting your own experience. On the plane, he sat next to a window. Middle seat empty. A man took the aisle. White, maybe mid-60s. wore a Vietnam veteran cap. Malik noticed it. The man didn't look at him for the first 10 minutes. Then, as the flight prepared to taxi, the man turned. "Army?" he asked. Malik nodded. "Yes, sir. I saw the video. That was you." Malik paused. "Yes, sir." The man leaned in slightly. "Goddamn shame what they did to you. You handled yourself with more grace than I would have." Malik didn't reply. The man continued. "When I came home from Nam, they spit on us, called us baby killers. We had to hide our uniforms. But I'll tell you what, I never got stopped for being white. I might have been hated for the war, but I wasn't feared for my skin. That hit differently." Malik looked him in the eye. "That means something coming from you." The man nodded. "It should. I don't know what it's like to walk in your boots, but I know what it's like to be forgotten." They didn't speak for a while after that, but it wasn't silence. It was understanding. Between soldiers. Between generations. Malik dozed as the plane climbed into the clouds. In his dream, he was running. Not from enemies, but from judgment. Every hallway he turned was lined with mirrors, and in each one, a TSA officer stared back. When he woke, his heart thudded. The clouds below looked like sand dunes. His mind slipped back to Iraq, to the sound of mortar shells, to the silence after, to holding the dog tags of his best friend, Collins, and whispering, "I'll get these home." He had, but home hadn't welcomed him. Not yet. When the plane landed, Malik stayed seated until most passengers had left. The veteran beside him gave a quick nod and disappeared into the jetway. Malik stepped out into the terminal. And for a moment, just one moment, he considered turning back. Not boarding the next plane. Not going home at all. Just disappearing. Because what do you do when home doesn't want you? When the flag you defended can't defend you back? But then he saw her. A woman, mid-50s, waiting near baggage claim, holding a sign, "Welcome home, Malik." His mother. She didn't smile right away, just opened her arms. And for the first time in hours, Malik let go. Of the stillness, the restraint, the invisible pressure to be both polite and proud. He walked into her arms like a man rescued from something far deeper than war. She whispered, "You're safe now." And he almost believed her. Almost. The house hadn't changed. Same creaky porch. Same chipped paint around the windows. Same scent of lemon oil and fried chicken drifting out from the kitchen as if time itself had hit pause. Malik Johnson stood in the doorway for a full 30 seconds before stepping in, like a soldier walking into memory. His mother met him with a tight grip around his waist, not letting go even when he said, "Mama, I'm good." She held on anyway, because she knew better. She could feel the weight in his spine, the stiffness in his arms, the way he exhaled too slowly like he was trying not to break open. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs, newspaper clippings, graduation pictures, and the family's proudest treasure. A black and white image of Malik's grandfather in a World War II uniform, face stone serious, eyes searching. Malik sat down at the kitchen table, and his mother, a short woman with hands calloused from decades of work, placed a steaming plate in front of him. "Eat first. Talk later." He didn't argue. He chewed slowly, methodically. Fried chicken, collard greens, mashed sweet potatoes. Soul food, both literal and emotional. Across the table, his Uncle Bo, a former Marine who never smiled without a good reason, lit a cigarette despite the sign taped to the fridge. "No smoking in the house." Uncle Bo squinted at him. "You on the news, boy? That you they dragging on Facebook?" Malik nodded. Bo took a slow drag, then said, "You should have slapped that rent-a-cop." "Bo," his mother snapped, "don't start. I'm just saying. You come home in one piece and that's how they treat you? After all that?" Malik stayed quiet. He didn't have the energy to argue, and besides, Bo wasn't wrong. He looked down at his plate, hands resting beside the fork like they were waiting for orders. Then Ava appeared, his niece, 9 years old. Same mischievous grin she'd had since age 3. She ran up and threw herself at him. "Uncle Malik, you're here. I told everyone at school you were going to land a helicopter in the backyard." He chuckled. Sorry, sweet pea. Budget cuts. She giggled, not understanding the bitterness underneath. Then, more seriously, she asked, did the bad people hurt you? Malik froze. That damn video. No, baby. I'm okay. But she looked at him a little longer, studying his eyes like kids do when they don't believe your words but want to trust you anyway. He hugged her tighter. Later that night, Malik sat out on the porch alone, looking at the stars. He used to believe the stars had answers. That out there, beyond the chaos of this country, was something steady, something fair. But now the sky felt like a map he couldn't read anymore. His phone buzzed. It was James, the same friend who warned him not to wear his uniform through the airport. Man, you all right? James asked. Malik hesitated. I don't know. They took your dignity. On camera. And half the country gonna act like it never happened. Malik didn't say anything. James continued. You know they put me on a no-fly list in 2018? No reason. Just system error. Took 3 weeks to fix it. No apology. How'd you deal with it? I stopped flying. Silence. You gonna let them make you small, Malik? No. Then do something about it. The next morning, Malik woke up early, still on the porch, his jacket draped over him like a blanket. The sun broke through the trees, and the first thing he saw was Ava drawing chalk stars on the sidewalk. She looked up. You want to help? He knelt beside her. What are we drawing? Heroes. She drew a figure with a big shield. That's you. He didn't correct her. Let her have that image a little longer. But as she drew, he asked himself, what does a hero look like now? A man filmed in shame? A man who didn't fight back? His pride had taken a hit that not even war had managed. But maybe, just maybe, what came next mattered more than what happened on tape. 2 days later, he was invited to speak at his old high school. A student group was organizing a Veterans Awareness Assembly. He didn't want to go. What was he supposed to say? Thanks for honoring me, now let me tell you how I got racially profiled in an airport. But his mother insisted. Sometimes God makes you the message, even when you didn't ask to be. The auditorium was packed with restless teens. Some whispered, some scrolled on their phones. But when Malik stepped on stage, wearing civilian clothes with just one small pin on his chest, his unit's insignia, the room quieted. He didn't use a script, didn't preach. He just told the story, not the viral version but the full truth, about serving, about watching friends die, about believing he'd earned his place, then being reminded with cold efficiency that to some people, his skin made him suspect before his badge made him brother. He ended with a question, if our country doesn't recognize the dignity of its defenders, then who will it recognize? There was a long silence after. One teacher stood to clap. Then more. A ripple. A rising. A moment. That night, Malik sat in his room, scrolling through emails. One from a journalist. Another from a veterans group. And then one from a woman named Sarah. My father was a Tuskegee airman. He once said the hardest part wasn't war. It was coming home. Thank you for speaking truth to that. If you ever need an ally, I'm here. Malik leaned back. Maybe there were more people watching than he thought. Not just trolls and doubters, but men and women like Sarah. Like that old vet on the plane. Like his uncle, underneath all the smoke and gruffness. Men who understood the betrayal. Who'd lived it. Survived it. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Not on a battlefield abroad, but right here, on the sidewalks, in classrooms, in the echo chambers of the internet, and in the hearts of the people who still believe that being an American meant something, even when America forgot you. Malik didn't have all the answers yet, but he had clarity, and maybe that was enough to start with, because this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every black man who saluted the flag and still got stopped at the gate. Every veteran who came home hoping for peace and got handed paranoia. Every little girl drawing chalk stars, hoping her heroes still shine. Malik had been humiliated, yes, but not defeated, not silenced. And as long as he still had a voice, still had breath in his chest and fire in his gut, he'd keep telling the truth. Loudly, clearly, unapologetically, 'Cause someone somewhere needed to hear it. Maybe a student, maybe a stranger, maybe even you. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks since Malik Johnson had stepped off that plane and into the strange silence of a country that hadn't decided yet whether to welcome him or forget him. The video had passed its viral peak. The media had already moved on. Another tragedy, another trending topic. But for Malik, the echo hadn't faded. It followed him in grocery stores where strangers glanced twice. It waited in the mailbox with envelopes from veteran support committees who wanted to quote his story but not touch his truth. It lived in the awkward silences between old friends who didn't know how to bring it up. And it roared every time he looked at the uniform hanging limp in his closet like a flag at half-mast. His life hadn't gone back to normal. It had taken a new shape, unfamiliar and unfinished. Some veterans returned home to parades. Malik returned home to headlines and hashtags. And somewhere beneath it all, under the politeness and half-hearted apologies, he felt something gathering. Pressure. Like a storm forming behind his eyes. The trigger came on a Wednesday morning. He had driven into town to speak at a small college campus about military service and race in America. A panel hosted by a local civic group. The hall was small, intimate. 50 people. Mostly white. Mostly older. Men like the ones he'd seen in VFW halls. Denim shirts, faded tattoos, firm handshakes. He walked in with no expectations. Just a need to tell the truth even if it made people squirm. The first two speakers before him were cautious, patriotic, well-intentioned. They spoke of duty, sacrifice, and healing. Then came Malik. He stood behind the podium, hands resting flat. "I was profiled at the airport 3 weeks ago," he began. "I wasn't shouting. I wasn't resisting. I was in uniform. But to some folks, none of that mattered." A few heads nodded slowly. Others tilted. He went on. Told the story, not the viral edit, not the polished version, but the raw one. The quiet humiliation. The way the air changed around him. The part where the officer touched his dog tags without asking. "They didn't see a soldier," he said. "They saw a black man they didn't trust. And that tells me something deeper's broken." The room went still. One man, late 60s, raised his hand. "Son," he said carefully, "I'm not saying that didn't happen to you, but don't you think maybe it was just bad protocol? Maybe it wasn't about race. Maybe it was just a mistake." Malik stared at him. He could feel the blood rise, but he didn't raise his voice. Instead, he stepped out from behind the podium. "Sir," he said, "have you ever been mistaken for a threat while honoring a flag you risked your life for?" The man didn't answer. "Have you ever watched someone handle your brother's dog tags like contraband?" Still silence. Then, with respect, "Maybe you're not qualified to tell me what a mistake looks like." The audience didn't erupt. This wasn't that kind of moment. But a quiet, seismic shift passed through the room. And when Malik stepped out into the parking lot an hour later, an older woman followed him out. She walked slowly, deliberately. "My brother died in Vietnam," she said. "I remember when they brought his body home. We had to beg the town to lower the flag." Malik nodded. "I'm sorry." She touched his arm lightly. "No, I'm sorry that you're still fighting here." That night, something in him cracked. He sat in his truck for a long time outside the house, staring at the dashboard. His phone buzzed, his CO from Fort Bragg. "You all right?" the voice asked. "Saw the panel online." Malik replied, "I'm all right, just tired." "You thinking of filing a formal complaint?" Malik hesitated. "You know what happens when a black man complains in uniform? They say he's angry, ungrateful, a troublemaker." The CO sighed. "You'd be surprised who's watching, who's listening." Then he added, "You didn't go through that for nothing." That sentence lingered. What if it didn't have to end with him? What if the point of the pain was to make people see? Not just him, but the system. The rules that weren't written but followed anyway. The culture that turned uniforms into shields for some and targets for others. 2 days later, Malik found himself in a church basement in downtown Atlanta. It was a support group for black veterans. Not run by the VA, just by them, for them. 15 men, all ages. Navy, Army, Marines. Retired. Discharged. Some clean-cut, some grizzled. They knew each other. They had scars that matched. And they welcomed him like blood. He told his story again. Slower this time. More measured. And when he finished, one of the older men, maybe in his 70s, spoke up. You think this just started, son? I got stopped by police in 72 wearing my greens. They said I stole them. Laughter bitter. Familiar. Another man added, you know why they hate seeing us in uniform? Because it forces them to see us as equal. And they don't like that math. Malik finally smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. That night he drove home with something new in his chest. Not anger, not pain, but clarity. He started writing, not just tweets, not just replies to media requests, but something real, a letter, an open one. To America, he wrote, you asked me to serve and I did. You trained me to lead and I did. But the moment I needed protection, from your own suspicion, you looked away. I am not your enemy. I am not a symbol. I am a man who wore your flag with honor. And I will not be silent while you dishonor me. The letter went live the next morning. Within hours it caught fire. Not because it was angry, but because it was precise, controlled, true. Other veterans shared it. Black, brown, even white. Some disagreed. Some sent threats. But more sent thanks. And something remarkable happened. A retired general emailed him. I have served 40 years and I've seen things we swept under the rug for too long. You have my respect. And my help. Malik read it twice. Then again. Maybe the tide was shifting. By week's end, the Department of Homeland Security requested a private interview. Not an apology. Not yet. But a meeting. Malik agreed. Because silence was no longer an option. And as he walked into that federal building in his best suit, not his uniform but his truth, he knew this chapter would not be the last. But it would be the turning point. The part where the soldier stops waiting for dignity and starts demanding it. And somewhere, he hoped, a little girl was still drawing heroes on the sidewalk. Because now, finally, her uncle was starting to believe he could be one again. The walls of the federal building were the kind of white that felt sterile, stripped of any warmth or memory. Malik Johnson sat on a leather chair that creaked beneath him, facing a long conference table lined with polished nameplates, untouched water bottles, and tight-lipped bureaucrats who smiled without meaning it. To them, this was a PR meeting. Damage control. A page in the playbook. But to Malik, this was war. Not with bullets, but with silence. With the weight of history that they wouldn't acknowledge but he couldn't escape. A man in a gray suit leaned forward. DHS liaison. His tie too tight, his eyes too careful. Mr. Johnson, he began. First off, thank you for your service. We understand the recent incident at the airport has caused some public concern. Malik didn't blink. He'd heard that phrase before, public concern. It was code for you made us look bad. Another official, a woman from the Office of Civil Rights, added, we want to assure you that we take allegations of profiling very seriously. Allegations, Malik said calmly. There's video. She shifted. The man in gray cleared his throat. Our goal is to ensure that what you experienced doesn't happen again. That proper retraining is implemented. Malik stared at him. Retraining doesn't fix a mindset. You don't need a PowerPoint to know that you don't interrogate a soldier carrying dog tags like they're contraband. Silence. The room held its breath. Then he leaned forward, voice steady. Let me ask you something. If I had been white, in the same uniform, same bag, same gait, do you think I'd have been pulled aside? They didn't answer. Not really. Just a shuffle of papers. A murmur about procedures. One man finally said, we can't speculate on hypotheticals. Malik nodded slowly. Of course not. Because when it comes to race in this country, silence is always the safest answer. He stood up. I didn't come here for a statement. I came to see if any of you had the courage to say the truth out loud. And with that, he walked out. In the parking lot, the sun was brutal. Atlanta heat, thick, humid, oppressive in its own way. He pulled off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and exhaled. There was no satisfaction, no moment of triumph, just the familiar ache of standing tall in a country that still couldn't look him in the eye. His phone buzzed. It was Ava. She'd figured out how to send voice memos. "Uncle Malik, I saw your name on the internet again. Mama said you're like a superhero. I told my class you could talk to the president." He chuckled despite everything. "Not yet, baby," he whispered. "But maybe one day." Later that night, he sat in his childhood room, walls now bare except for a single photo of him in basic training, arms around two fellow recruits, one Latino, one white. They'd called themselves the Three Stripes, a play on their different backgrounds and the ranks they hoped to earn. One of them, Jason, had been killed by an IED. The other, Chris, now taught ROTC in Ohio. Malik hadn't spoken to Chris in years, but tonight he dialed. When Chris answered, his voice cracked with surprise. "Malik? Man, it's been a minute." "Too long," Malik said. "You saw the video?" "Yeah," Chris said quietly. "I saw it, and I was pissed. You don't gotta say that just because we wore the same boots. I'm saying it because it's true. You looked like you were back in the sandbox, just trying to survive." Malik was silent. Then Chris added, "Let me know what I can do. I don't care if it's writing letters or showing up." Malik smiled. "I just needed to know somebody else still remembered." Over the next week, things moved faster than he expected. The open letter continued to circulate. A national talk show reached out. At first, Malik hesitated. He didn't want to be a headline. He didn't want to be the angry veteran. But James said something that changed his mind. "You either tell your story or they tell it for you. And trust me, they'll get it wrong." So he flew to New York. This time, no delays, no random screenings, no hands on his bag. Just tense politeness like they recognized him now, not as a threat but as a potential liability. The studio was cold. The host was warm. She asked real questions. Malik answered with clarity, not rage. He spoke of service, sacrifice, and the betrayal of returning to a home that mistrusted his skin more than it honored his oath. "What would justice look like to you?" she asked. He paused, then said, "Justice isn't a headline. It's a policy. It's accountability. It's knowing that the next black soldier who walks through that airport won't have to explain why he deserves dignity." The crowd nodded. Some stood. And after the cameras stopped rolling, a Vietnam vet approached him backstage, tears in his eyes. "I came home and was spit on," the man said. "But at least I was seen as American. They looked at you like you didn't belong. And that ain't right." Back in Georgia, the community started organizing. Not just marches, but action. Local airports demanded bias training. TSA agents sent anonymous messages, admitting the system was flawed. One even wrote, "I remember you. I wanted to say something that day, but I didn't. I froze. I'm sorry." Malik read that one 3 times. Forgiveness didn't come easy, but maybe, just maybe, change began with confession. He spoke at more schools, more churches. He sat with mayors, with police chiefs, with veterans from every war since Korea. Some didn't agree with everything he said, but they listened, and that was new, and that was something. One afternoon, after speaking at a university ROTC program, a young cadet approached him, black, 19, full of fire. "Sir," he said, "you make me proud to wear this uniform, but also scared." Malik looked him in the eye. "That fear means you're awake. But don't let it make you small. Let it make you sharp." The cadet nodded. "Yes, sir," and walked away a little taller. That night, Malik drove to a veteran cemetery just outside town. It wasn't Veterans Day. No ceremony. No flags. Just him and the quiet. He walked row by row until he found Colin's headstone. The man who died saving 3 others. The man whose dog tags had been touched like evidence. Malik knelt, placed a coin on the stone, and whispered, "I didn't let them forget you." Then he sat back on the grass, stars blinking overhead. Somewhere between sorrow and peace, he found his breath again. The war wasn't over. Not the one overseas, but the one right here. Inside systems, inside hearts, inside the hard truth of what it means to love a country that doesn't always love you back. But he wasn't retreating. Not now. Not ever. Because someone had to keep walking through the fire until the next soldier didn't have to. And if that someone had to be him, then so be it. The letter came in a plain envelope with no markings except the words, Office of the Inspector General. No stamp of apology. No bold headline. Just another piece of mail in a stack that Malik Johnson almost ignored. He was at the kitchen table that morning, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying to decide if speaking truth to power actually made anything move, or if it just made you tired. 3 weeks of meetings, calls, speeches, interviews. The world had heard him, sure, but systems don't flinch from noise. They flinch from pressure. And pressure takes time. His mother walked past him humming an old Sam Cooke tune, the one about change coming. Malik tore open the envelope. Inside was a formal notification. The Department of Homeland Security had launched an internal investigation into the incident at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson. A review board would convene. There would be testimonies, documentation. The TSA agents involved had been placed on temporary administrative leave. It wasn't a victory. It was a beginning. And beginnings are hard to trust when you've lived too many false starts. Later that day, Malik got a call from a woman named Angela Williams, civil rights attorney, mid-40s, sharp as a switchblade. She introduced herself with no fluff. I read your letter. I saw your interview. And I'm not interested in symbolism. I'm interested in reform. You want in? Malik hesitated. What does in mean? She replied. It means you stop being the story and start becoming the strategy. 2 days later, they met in a crowded Atlanta cafe. She was dressed in all black, laptop open, notes scrawled across 3 legal pads. I've filed against airport authorities before, she said. But they bury these things. Unless, she leaned in. We build a coalition. Vets, lawyers, activists. You have the story. Now we weaponize it. Malik raised an eyebrow. Weaponize? Not with bullets, she smiled. With outrage. Something about her reminded him of his first drill sergeant. No wasted motion. No wasted breath. Just conviction. Malik nodded. All right, let's do it. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Malik sat in round tables with former federal agents who'd been silenced. He spoke with black pilots who admitted they'd been told not to grow beards or wear hoodies off duty to avoid misunderstanding. One of them, a former Air Force captain, told Malik, they like us in uniform until we stop smiling. Everywhere Malik went, stories poured out like wounds that had waited years to be named. Not just profiling, not just fear, but the deeper ache. Being good enough to die for your country, but never good enough to feel safe in it. Angela helped draft a proposal, the Johnson Protocol, a set of airport policy reforms aimed at bias reduction, transparency, and oversight. It was bold, ambitious, destined to fail without momentum. So Malik hit the road again. He visited cities that had only seen him on screens. Detroit, Baltimore, Dallas. He stood in VFW halls with peeling paint and sat beside Vietnam vets who hadn't spoken publicly in decades. One of them, a white Marine named Ernie, handed Malik a folded paper after a town hall. Read it later, he said. That night, Malik opened it. It was a confession. In 1968, Ernie had stood silent while 2 black soldiers were targeted by MPs on a base in Da Nang. He'd done nothing. I told myself it wasn't my fight, the letter said. I was wrong. I'm with you now, brother. If you'll have me. Malik sat with that for a long time. Because healing isn't just apology. It's admission. And this country had too few of those. Back in Georgia, Ava watched from the sidelines. She'd made a scrapbook called Uncle Malik versus the Airport. Pages full of magazine clippings, glitter, and captions like, "This is what strong looks like," scrawled in pink marker. When he came home from one trip, she ran up and said, "I told my class about you. My teacher said you're brave." He knelt beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Baby girl," he said, Sometimes being brave means telling the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. She looked up at him, curious. Did it help? Malik didn't answer right away. It's starting to. Then came the rally. Washington, D.C., the National Mall. A coalition of veteran organizations, civil rights groups, and military families gathered to demand federal action. Tens of thousands attended. Some held signs. Others held silence. Malik stood at the podium, flanked by Angela, Ernie, and a dozen other veterans of every background. He didn't read from notes. He didn't need to. I stood still while they searched my body like it was a threat, he said. I stayed calm while they touched the only thing I had left of my fallen brother. And I've stayed quiet for too many years while others just like me were treated like shadows in the country we served. No more. If the uniform doesn't protect us, then we will protect each other. If the flag won't cover us, then we'll cover one another in truth, in courage, in action. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was recognition. A wave of old soldiers and young activists rising together. For a brief moment, the country felt like it could be better than what it had shown. That night, Malik returned to his hotel room and found a voicemail from the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Johnson, the voice said, your courage has made ripples beyond what you can see. I want to meet, not for optics, for solutions. Malik stared at the phone for a long time. Then he called his mother. Mama, he said, we might be getting somewhere. She was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, you remember what your grandfather used to say? Justice don't come in a rush. Comes with footsteps. Steady ones. You're walking, baby. Just don't stop. Malik sat by the window looking out over the city. Headlights moved like stars on the ground. Somewhere down below, a new generation of kids were dreaming. He hoped they'd dream different. Dream louder. The battle wasn't won. There were still walls to tear down. Still blind eyes to open. But the air had shifted. Slightly. Tangibly. And sometimes that's how change comes. Not with fanfare, but with footsteps. Steady ones. One voice. One protest. One truth at a time. The hearing room wasn't as grand as the cameras made it seem. No oak panels or flags billowing behind judges. Just gray walls, cheap carpeting, and tired fluorescent lighting that hummed like it didn't want to be there either. Malik Johnson stood at the center of it all, dressed in a navy blue suit his mother had pressed that morning. His shoes polished not for show but for honor. No uniform. Not today. He'd made that choice deliberately, because what happened to him wasn't about the army. It was about America, and he needed them to see him not as a soldier but as a man. A man who had bled for his country, and then had to fight again just to be seen by it. To his left sat Angela Williams, her fingers laced calmly but her eyes locked on every movement in the room like a hawk circling prey. To his right, a row of veterans, black, white, Latino, men who had fought in wars from Vietnam to Fallujah, had come to stand with him. Behind him, rows of reporters scribbled, clicked, and live-streamed. But Malik didn't look at them. He kept his focus forward. Across the table sat TSA officials, DHS liaisons, policy advisors, all lined up like they were part of a museum exhibit called Bureaucracy Under Pressure. The chairwoman, a black congresswoman from Illinois with a voice like gravel and thunder, adjusted her mic. Mr. Johnson, she said, you have the floor. He stood, took a breath, not because he was nervous, but because he needed to slow the fire building in his chest. Then he began. I didn't come here to relive trauma. I came here to reveal it. I didn't ask to be the center of this story, but now that I am, I intend to use every second to speak plainly. He told them what happened. From the moment he stepped into the airport to the moment he was cleared and left without so much as a nod. But he didn't stop there. He told them about the messages he'd received. Hundreds. From other veterans, many of them black or brown, who had been quietly humiliated in airports across the country. Some were searched. Some were followed. One was handcuffed in front of his daughter. Another was banned from flying for asking why his bag was opened. Malik read their words out loud. No names, just stories, truths, evidence that this wasn't a fluke. It was a pattern. a system designed to function randomly but enforced predictably. At one point, a TSA official interrupted. "Mr. Johnson, with all respect, these are anecdotal." Angela leaned forward, her voice like a blade. "We've submitted over 80 sworn affidavits. If that's anecdotal, then so is your entire policy manual." The official flushed and went silent. Malik continued. "You trained me to spot threats, to protect, to de-escalate. And on that day, I used every skill I had, not to survive a foreign enemy, but to survive a domestic assumption. I was calm so they wouldn't fear me. I was quiet so they wouldn't escalate. I was compliant, even when it stripped me of dignity. And still, I was treated like I didn't belong." He looked each panel member in the eye. "Tell me, how many white soldiers have had to beg for dignity after service? How many of them are stopped for wearing the very uniform you claim to honor?" Silence. Then the chairwoman leaned into her mic again. "Mr. Johnson, what do you want us to do?" Malik didn't pause. "Pass the Johnson Protocol. Fund it. Enforce it. Make sure it's not a pamphlet, it's policy. And if someone breaks it, hold them accountable. Not with retraining videos. With consequences." He looked around. "You want trust? Then act like you deserve it." That line landed like a hammer. Not loud, just final. After the hearing, reporters swarmed. Malik gave one brief statement. "This isn't about my story anymore. It's about stopping the next one." Then he walked away, not because he was finished, but because there was still more to do and speeches don't fix systems. That evening, back in Georgia, he sat on the porch with Uncle Bo. The older man passed him a cold beer and said, "Heard you shook the hill today." Malik shrugged. "I said what needed to be said." Bo grinned. "About damn time someone did." The next morning, something happened Malik hadn't expected. A letter arrived, handwritten. It was from a white man in Iowa, Korean War vet. He wrote, "I used to think racism was just noise from people looking to be angry. Then I watched them touch your dog tags like they were drugs. And I saw your face. That broke something in me. I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner." Malik sat with that for a long time, because that's what truth does. It breaks things, then builds, then breaks again. Not everyone gets there, but some do, and that matters. 2 days later, TSA issued a public statement. They would be launching a nationwide review of their screening processes, starting with implicit bias training and third-party oversight. Not the whole policy Malik wanted, but a crack in the wall. One they could work with, and work they did. Angela drafted amendments. Malik met with lawmakers. Veterans groups pledged support. A national airline, after pressure, invited Malik to speak at their internal summit. He walked into that room filled with corporate suits and said plainly, "You put us on the posters. You use us in your commercials. But the second we walk onto your planes without smiling, we become threats. Fix that." And slowly things began to shift. Not evenly, not everywhere, but enough to notice. A new TSA policy memo surfaced internally, stating that military service should not exempt passengers from screening, but that racial profiling violates our mission and undermines public trust. Malik smiled bitterly when he read that. It wasn't perfect, but it was written, and that meant someone somewhere had to be accountable to it now. One night, near the end of that summer, Malik spoke at the American Legion National Convention. Room full of vets, every kind of story, every kind of pain. He stood on that stage and said, "We didn't wear the uniform for praise. We wore it for principle. And that principle says no man's skin should make him a suspect, especially not when it's wrapped in sacrifice." The crowd didn't cheer, they stood. And when they did, Malik saw something in their eyes that wasn't just support. It was memory, recognition, of every time they'd been seen and unseen, respected and erased. Later that night, he sat with Angela, looking over the updated policy draft. "We're getting close," she said. Malik nodded. "Close isn't the same as done." She smiled. "No, but you've turned this from a moment into a movement." Malik looked out the window. Somewhere, a plane roared overhead, slicing through the sky like it had somewhere important to be. He thought of Ava, of Collins, of every man and woman who had returned from war only to find a different kind of fight waiting at baggage claim. We keep going, he said, until silence costs them more than truth ever cost us. Because real justice doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives when no one's watching, when the uniform comes off and dignity still remains, when the next black soldier walks through that airport, not to suspicion but to silence. The good kind, the respectful kind, the kind that means you've been seen, honored, and let be. That's what Malik was building. Not just reform, but return. A homecoming that finally felt like home. The letter came from a child. No return address. Just neat handwriting in purple marker and a single sticker of a gold star on the back of the envelope. Malik Johnson opened it slowly, careful not to tear the paper. Inside was a folded sheet, crayon drawings around the border. In the center, in looping script, it read, "Dear Mr. Malik, my teacher showed us your speech. My daddy was in the army too. He said sometimes heroes come home and nobody sees them. But I see you. I told my class you're my hero now." It wasn't signed with a full name. Just Love, Casey, age 9. Malik sat at the kitchen table, the early morning light cutting through the blinds, bathing the letter in gold. He read it twice, then a third time. His fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. Not from anger, but from something deeper. Grief, honor, resolve. You don't carry a letter like that lightly. You carry it like you once carried a flag over a friend's body. Weeks had passed since the hearing, since the rally, since the headlines. The policy changes were still crawling through government halls like molasses uphill, but something had shifted. TSA had initiated a task force. Congressional allies had begun drafting legislation mirroring the Johnson Protocol. Airports in Seattle, Boston, and Denver had reached out to pilot new screening reforms. Veterans organizations, some of which had once ignored Malik, now invited him to speak. But the real change wasn't in statements. It was in the silences that followed. In the way people paused before saying, "Thank you for your service," as if they finally understood it wasn't just a greeting. It was a promise. That morning, Malik laced up his boots. Not military issue this time, just black leather, worn from walking into too many rooms that weren't built to hear the truth. He was headed to a high school in Savannah where students had requested him not for a lecture, but for a conversation. "We want to talk about justice," one of them wrote, "but we don't want it from a textbook. We want it from someone who's lived it." That hit Malik harder than most speeches ever could. When he arrived, the auditorium was buzzing. Not with applause, but anticipation. Malik stepped on stage with no slideshow, no podium, just a chair. He sat, looked out at the sea of faces, black, white, brown, eager, and began. "When I was your age, I thought wearing the uniform would protect me, that if I loved this country loud enough, it would love me back. But love isn't guaranteed by loyalty. It's proven by how you're treated when you're vulnerable." He told them the story, not just the airport but the after, the moments no camera caught, the letters from veterans who'd kept their stories quiet out of fear they'd be seen as bitter, the apology he still hadn't received, the policies still stalling in committees. "But I'm still here," he said, "still fighting, because justice doesn't retire. It doesn't take days off. And it sure as hell doesn't happen by accident." At the end, a girl raised her hand. "Mr. Johnson, do you ever regret serving?" Malik looked at her, steady. "No. I regret thinking silence would protect me after I served. But not the service. That was mine. And no one gets to take that from me." That night, back home, he sat on the porch with his mother. She rocked slowly, knitting something for Ava. Malik looked out at the yard, where the cicadas hummed like distant drums. "You think it's working?" he asked. "All this noise I'm making?" She didn't look up, just said, "You ever seen a storm that didn't start with a single clap of thunder?" He chuckled. "That's a good line." "I'm your mother," she said. "I've got a few." He leaned back, exhaled. The air was thick with summer heat, but also something else. Peace. Not comfort, but peace. like he'd earned the right to rest for one evening. The next day, Malik received a call from Angela. "They've scheduled a final vote," she said. "The Johnson Protocol full version. Real teeth this time. Independent oversight. Data audits. Mandatory accountability boards." Malik said nothing for a second, just closed his eyes. "When?" "Next Tuesday." "Do we have the votes?" She paused. "We're close. Real close. And there's one thing that might tip it." "What's that?" "You. In the chamber. In the room. Speaking again." Malik nodded. "Send me the details." Tuesday came. The chamber was packed. More than usual. Word had gotten around. Journalists, activists, veterans in uniform. Malik sat in the front row, not at the mic this time, but behind it. Behind the legislation. Behind the movement. The vote went to the floor. One by one, lawmakers stood and declared their side. For some, it was a political calculation. For others, it was conviction. And then the tally appeared. The Johnson Protocol passed. Majority. Clean. Decisive. The room didn't erupt in cheers. It rose in silence. Not out of indifference, but reverence. A collective breath that said, "Finally." Malik stood slowly. Angela grabbed his hand. Others patted his back. But he didn't smile right away. He just looked up, like he was trying to see beyond the ceiling, beyond the walls, beyond the years it took to get here. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Capitol dome, Malik walked alone to the Lincoln Memorial. He stood at the steps, hands in his pockets, staring at the statue of a man who'd once held a broken nation in words. A security guard recognized him, walked over. "I saw you on TV," the guard said. "My son's in boot camp now. Told him about you. Told him if he comes home and they treat him wrong. Men like you already paved the road to fight back." Malik nodded. "I didn't pave it alone." The guard smiled. "But you kept walking when it got dark." Malik stayed there a while, long enough for the streetlights to flicker on. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out Casey's letter, folded neatly in his breast pocket, and read it one more time. "But I see you." That's all he ever wanted. Not pity, not celebrity, just visibility. A country that looked its black veterans in the eye and said, "We see you. We know what we've done, and we're going to do better." Before he left, he pulled a coin from his pocket. One he'd been given in Iraq after saving a squad mate under fire, and placed it at the foot of the monument. Not for Lincoln, but for the next soldier who'd stand there, wondering if this land still had room for his dignity. Malik whispered into the dusk, "I'm not done, but tonight I rest." And for the first time in a long, long while, he believed he had earned it.